We're not going to ever be as big as some of those big nationals are, nor do we quite desire to. But I do think that with our agility, and if we can partner with the right kinds of folks out there, we can really get to a really powerful size that means something to the manufacturers and that means something to the physicians out there. And most importantly, means something big to the patients.
You've been leading nationwide for over 20 years, and most businesses don't even last half that long. What would you say is like the secret that kept it growing and relevant throughout so much industry change?
I think a lot of people get too much of running toward the shiniest, brightest object at the time. We kind of stayed true to ourselves and really kind of stayed in the CPAP lane, if you will.
What do you think others in this industry potentially still get wrong about the patient experience?
I think what we don't always appreciate is that so many things are out of a DME's control. It kind of feels backwards to me that, we provide a service and a product, and yet we have to go lean on a doctor or a sleep lab or whatever it happens to be so that we get paid for the service and the product we provided. I will tell you, and probably shouldn't share this on a platform like this, but...
All right, we are live on the #1 DME podcast in the country, claim to fame. Today's episode, we have David Siegel from Nationwide Medical. David, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Yep. Welcome, David. Happy to have you on here. Happy Friday.
Right back at you.
Awesome. Well, David, you're obviously a veteran in the industry, but for anyone who doesn't know who you are or what you do or anything about your company, we always like to kind of start like that.
Sure. Thanks. Yeah. David Siegel, CEO of Nationwide Medical. We've been in business for about 23 and a half years, and the ups and the downs got plenty of scars to prove that I've been around for about a quarter of a century or so.
David, Nationwide Medical has it become a household name in sleep and respiratory care. Take us back to what problem you were trying to solve when you started it.
If you'll indulge me a few seconds here, I'll give you kind of how we got involved. Both my father and myself were in the life insurance industry prior to finding our way to healthcare. And one of our unique ways of which we went about that space was not just thinking in terms of selling a life insurance policy and then hoping the person cancels their policy or hoping they don't cancel their policy and just going on to the next. The thought process was a person's going to buy multiple policies throughout their life. And so if you stay in touch with them, if you follow up with them when it comes time to buy a disability policy or mortgage protection or whatever it ends up being, we could end up being that solution. So as we started to segue our way into this space and we started looking at the CPAP machine, the idea was, well, don't just sell a CPAP machine and hope they just want to return it or hope they never want to return it. The idea is like follow up with them. Maybe they need additional support or, as it turns out, supplies. And sure enough, here we are, like say, nearly a quarter century later. And, resupply is such a common thing among all companies that serve in the respiratory space. But for us, it really started way back in the insurance industry about staying in touch with your customer and making sure they have what they need.
Yeah, it's unique because, to your point, you've been leading nationwide for over 20 years and most businesses don't even last half that long. What would you say is like the secret that kept it growing and relevant throughout so much industry change?
Yeah, I think that's a good one. I think you can go a lot of different ways with that, and luck would certainly have to be in that formulary. But, I think a lot of people get too much of running toward the shiniest, brightest object at the time. We kind of stayed true to ourselves and really kind of stayed in the CPAP lane, if you will. We have branched out a little bit to some other verticals, but make no mistake, CPAP and sleep and treating sleep apnea has really been our core focus. And we kind of resisted a lot of the temptations of running wherever the new code or the new way to make money, so to speak. So I think that kind of gave us an advantage as, the hills and valleys that, seem to follow wherever the new shiny object is.
That's a great piece of advice, David. And, we like to talk about the future of DME, but when we have interesting guys like yourself on the call, we always like to kind of learn even more of how it all started. So, obviously you were there since the beginning, but reaching out to patients who had been forgotten about, what did those early days look like for you guys?
Yeah, I mean, I will even confess I was part of those calls that reached out, and what you found is people were literally saying, I'm duct taping my tube to the machine because it keeps coming off. And it just wasn't thought of. I know it seems crazy in this day and age
Yeah.
because everybody talks resupply. There's fulfillment companies that support such actions. But back then, even the manufacturers weren't focused on it. It was like, it was anything they could do to get you to buy the machine, and they would almost throw masks into part of a deal to sweeten it. So really, we kind of took the reverse of it and thought about building it out. And I won't name the manufacturer, but when we first started trying to even do resupply, we worked with one of the manufacturers that had all this 3PL capability and what have you, and they couldn't do the filters and the tubing and the headgear and the chin straps and all those pieces. It was just so convoluted. We ended up hiring a guy from Mall who worked in our office, and we just literally hand packed the items to send them out. And we were able to do it more efficiently than this major manufacturer who had just never done like all these small parts. They had always just kind of done the machines and that kind of focus, if you will. So we kind of joked about it for a number of years after that. It took a retail guy from a mall to like figure out how to do resupply, and we made it work.
See, that's why we love hearing about the beginning. It's always interesting, scrappy stories, like people starting out of their garage sometimes, same concept.
Well, make no mistake, people are much smarter today than we were back then. So.
A lot more information.
We'll get to the AI stuff soon.
Right.
David,
go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, I was just thinking. I kind of read that your team started calling patients who hadn't heard from anybody in years, which is an incredible story. What was the moment that you kind of realized you were onto something much bigger?
Yeah, I mean, again, it was, I won't say day one, but it was early stages because, again, the concept came from our life insurance days, and I spent about 8 years in that space. And when I would call customers up, I mean, they literally didn't have any contact with life insurance agents after the initial sale was done. And it could just be for customer service reasons, like maybe you need to change your beneficiary, and that starts the building of the trust. Well, the same concept here is as we started reaching back out, it wasn't that people were like, oh, I want all these supplies. It was, hey, how are you doing on your therapy? What challenges are you coming across? Maybe their pressure's too tight, or maybe their mask is leaving such a mark on their nose that they don't like to wear it when they've got to go to work the next day. So you start uncovering those kind of problems even way back in the beginning. It really made a difference in terms of figuring out that there really is something to this. I know it seems like, obviously like great customer service. How could that not be a good thing? But there needs to be a revenue component to match putting all that effort. And so that's how we looked at it.
Interesting. And, it sounds like you've been doing patient follow-up and resupply long before it was the hot topic. What do you think others in this industry potentially still get wrong about the patient experience?
It's hard to point a finger and say a whole bunch of bad things because I think, we're all out there trying to do our best and we have a lot of different components to deal with. I think what we don't always appreciate is that so many things are out of a DME's control. It kind of feels backwards to me that we provide a service and a product, and yet we have to go lean on a doctor or a sleep lab or whatever it happens to be so that we get paid for the service and the product we provided. So I don't think patients understand what we have to go through. I don't think physicians have the same empathy for us in terms of what we do and what we have to, go through to get paid. And then obviously, everybody's trying to fit in the ecosystem. But in terms of what I think, DMEs don't do well, I think they're maybe just not putting enough resources toward giving an experience to a patient. We can't go as far as like Apple can go, but if you've ever bought an Apple phone, for example, the presentation which the phone comes in is pretty sophisticated. You have these stores that have all these customer service agents that are there to even do educations or trainings or all these kinds of things. And we would love to be able to do more of that in our space, but realistically, our reimbursement, we can't just charge $1,400 for an iPhone. So I think we're limited in some of that. So some of it is our fault, but some of it is also the reimbursement level just doesn't give us exactly what others in the retail space can do.
David, you kind of been through recessions, supply chain chaos. major shifts in reimbursement. I'm sure COVID was an interesting time, as it always comes up on our podcast. There's always some interesting story about that. What would you say would be core values that kind of helped you stay ahead through all this?
Yeah, like everyone, I mean, between recalls or COVID, or we all have our own challenges within our own industry. We actually had a rare curveball come up. I was actually pretty friendly with our landlord, and we were up for a renewal of our space. And he said, "Oh no, we'll go ahead and renew your lease. Don't worry about it. I'll come by in a few months. We'll sign the paperwork." And I hadn't heard from him for a couple of months, and I said, "Hey, we're coming up to the renewal date. I just want to make sure we get this knocked out." And he comes over the next day, and he's like, "I'm dreading this, but I've got to move you. The other tenant in my building wants your space. They're a big, huge company, and I need you to be out in a few months. But I have another building down the freeway just a few miles. I will give you a good deal, but I'm going to have you move." Well, I don't know how familiar you are with moves, but it's not like you just pick up and go with all the licensure and Medicare inspections, Department of Health, all that stuff you have to go through. So in kind of a window of a couple years, to your point, we had, all these different kind of once in a decade type experience that happened kind of all in a couple years span. And it really just fortified our team. I mean, I think, we're really blessed to have great people that have been, we've been together for lots of years, but the perseverance that they showed through kind of all these curveballs, it's amazing when you think you got through it, but at the same time, it also like bonded us in a way that, is pretty unique and pretty special. And I'm sure a lot of you folks who are listening here have similar stories and have similar shared experiences with your people that, you wouldn't trade them for anything. And that's certainly how I feel.
Yeah, absolutely, David. Like Alex said, there's always so many interesting stories of the tough times in DME. There always seems to be some sort of headwind or something looming, but, perseverance really big in our industry. And, now, there's new headwinds, but there's also a lot of exciting technology and advancements in DME. Where do you think resupply and follow-up care are heading with kind of this next wave of technology and AI?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I am so bullish on the next set of years, not only because I think that there are a lot of undiagnosed patients out there that, will eventually kind of flow through the funnel, but the technology piece is so massively different than it was, even 5 or 10 or 15 years ago, certainly. And when I think about resupply and I think about retouching with patients and care, I'm definitely excited kind of like where the next generation of technology is kind of taking us for our space. I'm not saying it's brand new technology, but I think it's relatively brand new technology for our space. And to kind of double click on that a little bit, I think of like the last few years has really been about intake and, how can we, fax wrangle and OCR more sophisticated and all the, e-scripting and trying to get away from fax machine and all that. And, clearly the next leap ahead is kind of to do with the interactive or agentic AI with the ability to phone call and take inbound phone calls and become more efficient that way so that people don't have to go through long, trees on your phone systems or, just Q&As on a website. So that to me is so super exciting because I feel like you can give a real patient experience and then your people can really focus on the things that you need people to do.
Yeah, absolutely. They kind of call it human in the loop, right? Disempowering us to do more with less and ultimately take care of more patients, which is all amazing for the industry. What's next for you and Nationwide? Where do you guys see yourself in the next 3 to 5 years?
Well, we did a big thing last year. We ended up, after being a family-owned company for over 2 decades, we ended up going through a process and ultimately partnered with a private equity. We were fortunate enough to find a great private equity that's healthcare focused and that really believed in our team and our mission. And instead of coming in and replacing a bunch of people or doing any of that, what they wanted to do was come in and support us with some resources and some sophistication because, even though we've been around for a long time, being family owned, we didn't have all the latest tricks and tips that, you might have learned in various schools or portfolio companies that they had owned. So it's really been just an exciting year for me to kind of elevate the things that I do on a daily basis and then have some resources to actually enter into the acquisitions world a bit this year. And we've got some that are brewing right now that I'm really, really excited about. And it's a space that we just really never were able to partake in years ago because we were just family owned and we didn't really have the resources to risk going after that. And so, you watched all these, big national companies buying up folks left and right. And our take is a little bit different. We're not going to ever be as big as some of those big nationals are, nor do we quite desire to. But I do think that with our agility, and if we can partner with the right kinds of folks out there, we can really get to a really powerful size that means something to the manufacturers and that means something to the physicians out there. And most importantly, means something big to the patients. And so I'm kind of excited I'm more than kind of excited. I'm really excited about the next 5 or so years in terms of what we can do from a growth strategy standpoint and some of the talent that we've already added and that we'll continue to add. And it's a fun time to be in the space. Now we just have to avoid the curveballs that could potentially come from the externals, i.e. competitive bidding or things of that nature that are out of our control.
That's awesome. Congrats. That's really
that's
exciting.
Super cool. So David, when you say like acquisitions, do you mean acquiring similar businesses to yourself and then kind of being able to leverage economies of scale in that nature?
Yeah, and not only that, I'm a huge fan of talent. I think that when you can put good people in a room, and I'm a huge sports lover, so I'll use a sports analogy for it. Is let's say it's your turn to pick in the draft. You might need a point guard, but there might just be the sensational forward that's out there or whatever. I'm for like, give me the can't miss forward, and I'll figure out how to run with multiple good players at the same position, or we'll figure out how to divide and conquer, things like that. So a big goal of mine in the acquisition is not to just buy something and then, cut the pieces down and, like you say, leverage it up to make 1 + 1 = 3. I'm looking at it more as like, who can we partner with, especially as we want to kind of traverse and go deeper around the country? Who are the thought leaders out there that could work well together as a team? I'm very collaborative and kind of my style, and I'm looking for folks that kind of want to, kind of put an all-star team together, so to speak, and then, let's lead the way and do some things out there that are maybe not the norm.
That's awesome. I love the concept of you're just really putting fuel on the fire of what you already have, not, taking maybe an approach, like you said, make 1 + 1 = 3, but also have a dream team, right? I think you're a great leader also. I know you're like very active in the industry through AAHomecare and things of that. Is there anything on that side of the DME world that you participate in that you think would be helpful for our followers to hear, or just any insights kind of from the advocacy standpoint?
Yeah. Happy to share a little bit of that, as my passion will probably come out in this answer a little bit. But a number of years ago, I got approached by Josh Marks and Bill Guidetti, who are longtime veterans in the space at one of the med trades. And they talked to me about joining AAHomecare. And to be honest with you, I'd probably seen the emails, but we were pretty much in our bubble for the first, I'd say, 17 or 18 years. And it just really wasn't on my radar. And, being out in California at the time, and as opposed to like Washington, D.C., other side of the country. So it just wasn't a thing I really thought about or thought I could even make an impact on. And those guys kind of got me to attend a meeting, and it went from one thing to another. And the next thing I know, I was on the respiratory committee and then the education committee. And then they asked me to be part of the executive committee. And it just kind of has taken off from there. And I'm even kind of leaning into taking even a more active role going forward. And now I've had a chance to go to DC a number of times and be part of our fly-in as a collective industry. And I always feel like if we do good for the industry, everybody will do well. And so it's been fun to kind of take that messaging to legislators and kind of advocate just on patients' behalf and on our, fellow companies like those of you who are listening here. And, it doesn't just have to be, how do I make nationwide medical grade? It can be, how can I make our industry more thought of, or, better reimbursed, or with, more backers, so that, we don't just get cut the second that, there's a need for money or something that the government decides.
Right on. And we actually had Stephanie Legree from AAHomecare on the podcast before, and she was great. But if you wanted to maybe elaborate and let all the DMEs that are listening now, know what kind of benefits could you expect to get as, a DME who's part of this association? Because there's a lot of great things.
Yeah, there really are. I could fill the podcast on that. So the first and foremost thing to me is the networking and the kind of being under the hood or being in the tent, so to speak. And what I mean by that is you'll get on some kind of committee. And even if you don't want to participate in terms of verbally and you just want to listen, you're going to be in a respiratory committee or diabetes council or whichever one you choose, a payer council, whatever is your thing or whatever somebody from your organization brings to the table. You get to participate with all these folks who are dealing with a lot of the same issues you are, but maybe at different points in time than you. So, you may be about to be embarking on trying to hire somebody or get a contract or, do whatever it is that comes next. There's probably somebody, a fellow committee member that has already done it or that can at least steer you in one direction or another. So by far and away, I have come across various forms of technology or different consultants that we could use to help deal with audits or whatever may, again, come up. So that, to me, pays for itself in spades. And then there's something about doing good for your industry and what that represents to all of the folks in the industry. And, you don't have to think of everything on your own. You can learn from others. And if you show that you're willing to share and you're willing to offer things to people, they're willing to offer it back. And I know for us, it's been a godsend in the sense that we've been turned on to so many tools or technologies that we have now incorporated that I probably wouldn't have known about it if I just kind of stayed in my bubble. So that would be the biggest thing I could tell you to lean in. And then, hey, all the good that you're doing from an advocacy standpoint is only helping your company. So, hopefully you can be part of that battle.
Yeah, that's a great message. We even had Jim and Rose on who run the MAMES conference out of Minnesota. And, a big part of what they were preaching was, technically a lot of these companies there are competitors, but it doesn't feel like that. They're all kind of working together to move the ball down the field together. It's not about this is my patient or their patient. It's really how do we collectively push the industry forward. So yeah, I'm pumped that you were able to use this platform. Hopefully we'll get even more people to join AAHomecare. I think we have a couple other people from their scheduled. So we really want to use this platform, not only to share amazing stories like yours, but to keep promoting advocacy as well.
Wow, that's awesome of you guys to give a platform like that. And I know Tom Ryan, who leads AAHomecare, I mean, he puts so much passion into everything he's doing. He's got a great team. And I think of Jay Witter, who's out there lobbying every day, and Laura Willard and so many others that make up that team. They truly care so much and they try so hard. And we're in the battle right now trying to figure out, competitive bidding. And maybe by the time this airs, maybe we'll know more. But whatever happens, we're doing everything we can from an advocacy standpoint, and folks are listening. We'll see what happens. Like I say, by the time this airs, this may have not aged well, or maybe it will have. But I can tell you that no stone is being unturned to try to battle for our industry and make sure that our industry is protected as much as we humanly can, so that we can do the work we do, which is care for patients.
That's great.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's cool to hear people that are so motivated and so driven in one space. And I kind of wanted to ask you on a personal level, how do you stay motivated after being in this space for, over 2 decades, haven't really looked outside, you kind of have your blinders on in one area. How do you personally stay motivated for so long?
Yeah, I guess I'm a pretty motivated guy in general. I think it's in the DNA to some degree, but I mean, I will say I've been going to the med trade shows for years and all the other conferences. It seems like there's so many these days, which is a great thing. And I mean, so many in the industry have become my closest friends. And, maybe that means I'm working too much and not spending more time in my social life. I certainly could argue that. But so that's a big piece of it, is you feel like you're part of a sisterhood, brotherhood type thing that, you want to be able to contribute. You want to keep up with the Joneses. You also, want to be successful and support all the employees who, have stayed in there with us through all the thick and the thin. So yeah, I feel that's a big piece of it. And then I will tell you, and probably shouldn't share this on a platform like this, but I absolutely love the game of poker. I go to the World Series of Poker every single year. I moved to Las Vegas a few years ago. So, if you want to play in that world, you've got to have a good living so that you don't have to, so you're not afraid to do the bluff at the poker table, because you're not bluffing the rent money away. So that's a little bit of the motivation too.
That's awesome. I'll have to text you for some tips next time I'm in Vegas.
Well, my number one
I
tip
play
is,
blackjack, but I'm not good at it. So
yeah, I was gonna say my number one tip is don't gamble.
yeah,
But if you like it and you want to enjoy it and you can keep it in control, then now I
yeah,
sound like a Gamblers Anonymous ad. But
yeah.
I saw this device. I was telling Wayne about this the other day. That it's like a little mini box safe that every time you gamble, you put your chips in this box that's locked, and your key is at your hotel room, so you can never take your money out if you win. I was like, if I had a problem, that would be a really cool idea.
that is a good. That's maybe I'll start incorporating that.
Yeah.
I'll send you the link. Yeah, not promoted.
Exactly.
David, one last question before we close this out. When you look back on this journey so far, what is one thing you're most proud of?
You know what? I'll end it to me where it all starts. I have been blessed with so many great employees that come to work every day and grind for the patients. They do it. Everybody deals with it, right? Patients screaming at you, this didn't go right. They've had bad nights of sleep. It's not them, but they're taking it out on you. And I've had employees that have stuck with me for over 2 decades, some of them, and most of them are over a decade at least. It is kind of unusual to have that many folks stay that long. So to me, that'll definitely be if there is such a thing as legacy, that's the thing that I'll look back and think, wow, I've watched these people that themselves were teenagers or in their 20s, and now they've got kids that have come and started working here at Nationwide Medical. And we've had tons of kids that have come through, kids of employees that have come through the years. And that is just beyond special to me. So including my own kids that have spent time here and grinded away. And I think DME is one of the greatest breeding grounds you could ever have for how to deal with work life. So yeah,
That's incredible.
Yeah, that's really awesome.
Love to hear that, David. Well, at this point of the podcast, usually we move to something called a rapid fire. It's a short session where we just do this or that kind of questions. Easy, fun stuff. If you're ready, we can jump right to it.
Fire away.
Okay, let's go. If your coffee machine broke, would you fix it yourself or order a replacement immediately?
I have no chance of that happening because I've never had a cup of coffee in my life. So
Wow.
I'm
That's
not
shocking.
anti-caffeine. Don't get me wrong. I love caffeine, but I never had coffee. So I don't see mine breaking anytime soon.
Okay, there you go. Good answer. Dream vacation, totally off the grid or 5-star resort with Wi-Fi?
Oh, totally 5-star. Yeah. For me, camping is like opening a window at a hotel room. So
Would you rather relive your startup days or fast forward 10 years to see the industry's future?
oh, that's a good one. You know what? The first pass through, I feel like with all the ups and downs, we got to the other side and we're here. So I don't need to redo that one. I'd love to see what comes next. It's pretty dang exciting. So I'll look ahead.
For sure. If you can automate one part of your daily routine, what would it be?
Can I automate my run in the morning so that I don't have to do it?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, no cardio over here,
yeah.
unfortunately.
Well, it's probably getting there. What it'd be is the emails still come in at voluminous amounts. So the more that technology can probably assist in the future with that'd probably be where I'd lean.
Right. Who would play you in a movie about Nationwide? Tom Hanks or Jason Bateman?
Oh.
That's our last one.
Gosh, Tom Hanks. I love Tom Hanks, but Jason Bateman's so great too. Well, Tom Hanks would be willing to take the part. You can't go wrong. So I'll go with him.
Right on. Well, David, that just about wraps up today's episode. If anyone wants to contact you or reach out to you or find out any more information, stay connected, what's the best way for them to do so?
Shoot me an email at Siegel, that's DSIEGEL at nationwidemedical.com. I'll respond and connect from that point. And yeah, I'm a guy that likes to give as much as anyone. So if I can help you, I'm not looking for something in return. If I've got something that I've learned along the way, I probably picked it up from somebody else. So happy to share it. And hey, we're all doing good work out there. Keep battling and, keep grinding. We'll make it through one way or the other. So thanks for having me today.
Well, David, yeah, thanks so much for joining. This has been a really fun episode. And anyone who has not yet subscribed to the Claim to Fame podcast, please do so. David, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks again, David. Have a great weekend.
You too. Thank you.